Welcome to Running for Real, a global community with a shared love and curiosity for running. Together we reconnect with the reasons why we love to run and discover ways it helps us become better people. Whether it's the quiet moments of a morning run while the rest of the world still sleeps, or befriending the strangers next to you at the start line of a race, we are here to connect with others who see running as the common thread that weaves our lives together. Come join me, Tina Muir, as I talk with people from all walks of life, united by a love of running. Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 401 of the Running for Real podcast. But actually, that number is kind of irrelevant today. I want this episode to be an evergreen episode, an episode that goes on forever. I want it to be a resource. I want you to be able to send it on to people you know who have heel pain and are describing things similarly to what we are talking about today. If you have come here because you suspect you have a Haglund's deformity, first off, I'm sorry. There's nothing else I can say. It is not fun. I have been there. I am still there and still in the rehab process. But regardless of that, when I first came across my Haglund's deformity, you're going to hear about that in just a few minutes. I felt so frustrated and fed up with the lack of information online. There's plenty out there for Haglund's deformity, but when it came to runners, I just couldn't find anything about Haglund's. I just felt like there was an R4R article that was very old, and there was a few little clips from elite runners who had said they'd had the surgery, but then it was kind of nothing. It was like, I had the surgery, oh, here I am back running again. And so I really wanted to create an in-depth episode going through essentially the stages that I went through, and I suspect most people go through when it gets to this debilitating point. So we've got 4 parts to this episode today, and intentionally done in this order. First off, we are going to have my sports chiropractor here in St. Louis, Dr. Brennan Donahue. Brennan, you will hear, knows me very well. We're close friends. He's been with me this entire process. You're going to get to hear a bit about the basics of what Haglund's is and how to begin trying these conservative treatments. Next, you're going to hear from my good friend, and also we call each other twin, Stephanie Howe. I have interviewed Stephanie in the past. She is a professional trail and mountain athlete for the North Face, and she has dealt with Haglund's for a long time until she finally got it taken care of. She was the primary voice in my ear as I was trying to figure out what I was going to do about mine. When I was feeling so frustrated, she would be one of the first people I went to talk to about it. So I wanted to speak to her, to show the other side, that there is a life without this. This isn't a lifelong thing if you let it. Next, we are going to hear from my surgeon, Dr. Thomas, aka Tommy Haytmanek. He is an award-winning orthopedic surgeon and foot and ankle specialist with the Steadman Clinic. Now, I want to begin this. You'll hear me say this multiple times. While I featured Dr. Haytmanek from the Steadman Clinic, Dr. Anna Robinson from the Howard Head Sports Medicine Clinic, that does not mean you have to go here. Stephanie and I went to this place, but I promise you this episode is not just one giant ad. Every single person on this episode was very fair and unbiased in their explanation of things. When I knew I wanted to have this surgery, I knew I wanted the best, and by far and away, these were the 2 people recommended. So after we hear from Tommy, we're going to round out with Anna Robinson, who has a doctor of physical therapy. She is a PT at Howard Head Sports Medicine. She's presented and published on the topic Return to Sport, Considerations for Foot and Ankle, both locally and nationally. And together, these 4 people have been kind of the key cornerstones of my Haglund's to recovery process. Now, I wanted to collect everything I could find on this so you can send this to people that you care about, or maybe if this is you, this can be the relief that, finally, someone to talk about this that you have wanted. So without any further ado, let's check in with one of our sponsors and get right to this episode. As you probably know, I had surgery on my Achilles last month, and while that has been a interesting experience getting to watch my body heal and recover, and I'm so in awe of my body, you want to know what the first thing I did when I got back to the hotel room was? I put on my Tracksmith clothes because I knew they would make sure I was comfortable. They are so worn in a beautiful way, yet still the quality as ever is as good as it has ever been, even though they are 5+ years old, even though they've been worn hundreds of times. Those clothes continue to keep the quality level high. They are durable. They've handled so many sweaty runs, and now they have handled a recovery period. I put my Brighton base long sleeve straight on, and I put my session speed shorts on, which it is now time for. I am wearing a pair of them right now as we speak. They are high stretch, they are lightweight, they are incredibly comfortable, and they come in lots of really cool, fun colors. They fit well, and I've been wearing them for 5 years and I absolutely love them. You can buy one of these, you can keep it for a long time, you can use it over and over again and not be worried about that quality degradation. I encourage you to go to tracksmith.com/Tina. If you have not been a Tracksmith customer in the past, you can get $15 off your order of $75 or more by using code TINANEW. You can also use Tina Give to make a donation to Track Girls, along with getting free shipping by using code Tina Give. That's Tina New and Tina Give. I strongly encourage you to go check out those session speed shorts. The Brighton base long sleeve is my all-time favorite item. I also love the Lane 5 tights, which I do wear for races. Those have 5 pockets in them that are ideal for marathons. As you are training through your summer months, go check those out. Go to tracksmith.com/Tina. Brennan, Dr. Brennan, my friend, welcome to the Running Field podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, I have to start off with a bit of a silly question here. Just on a scale of 1 to crazy, how crazy have I been the past year?
You should have gave me a heads up. You were going to ask me that question in advance. You know, look, anytime anybody's going through these types of injuries, I think it brings out different sides of people. So, you know, that's my kind way of saying that it's been up there. I'm not going to put a number to it. Okay, I'll give you that. You've seen me at my worst. Let's put it that way. Okay, so I came to you, and I told you this. I recorded a video in January 2023 saying, I have a pain in my heel. I'm going to go get it checked out. And I came into you. Now, I didn't ask you this ahead of time. When do you remember me first complaining about my heel? Yeah, no, I remember that because I think you might have sent me the video. I can't remember or not. But I mean, it was before you did your 50 mile. Mm-hmm. And so I know that we were kind of nursing this thing a little bit before that. And so whenever, I don't have an exact timeline on that. Do you remember straight away being like, that's a Haglund's? I knew it was a Haglund's, but I don't jump to a conclusion that that's going to be your pain generator. Mm. So I think more people probably have Haglund's than they know. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that just because you have one, you have to get it removed or things like that. So on that note, you have seen Haglund's before in practice. You've had people come in and kind of get on with their lives. Let's talk through that piece of it first, that sometimes people have these, as we've noted. I definitely have it on my other foot as well, but it doesn't bother me. Tell us about how common is it that you see it in runners, yet they don't either don't know or they're able to keep it under control? Not too common, but the ones I have seen, a lot of it just leads to like insertional Achilles tendonitis and inflammation of the tissue around there, from tightened calf muscles and things like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, unfortunately, you are the first one that we've had to get to this point. Mm-hmm. All the other cases we've seen, we've been able to manage with conservative care, and they've been able to keep running pretty successfully. Mm-hmm. What would your advice be to someone who is, that January 2023 for me, that point where they've just started feeling pain? What would you tell that person to do? I would definitely be reaching out to some type of medical provider in your community. Just even if it's for an evaluation, whether that's to confirm your thoughts, deny your thoughts, they'll help you decide what you should do, but more importantly, what you shouldn't do. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people want to try all modalities at home first. And sometimes with these inflammations of these tendons, if we're at home scraping on it ourselves and doing all these things we see on Instagram, mm-hmm. we can be making that thing exponentially worse. Mm-hmm. And what has been the most interesting thing you have learned along this journey of obviously reaching the point where we had to kind of take it to the next level? But what did you learn about Haglund's deformity through seeing mine kind of
grow over the year?
That, I mean, we know these things, but not all conditions can be treated conservatively, right? We do eventually reach a point where we've kind of exhausted all options. And I think you probably see it in the running community more than not, that whole, if your doctor tells you to stop running, go to a different one. Well, that's not always going to be the case. And so if that's their first instinct on everything that you show up with, that's a different story, right? But if you're working with somebody who's helping you try and overcome these things, there might be a time where you got to shut it down. So.
And as the vast majority of your clients, is that the word?
Yeah, patients, clients.
Patients are runners. What are some common things you tend to notice with runners?
Oh, that's...
Being a runner yourself.
You know, I am a runner myself. I think we would rather run a few extra miles than do a little bit of strength work each week, right? If we have an extra 20 minutes in the week, most of us will add more mileage rather than do some myofascial work, do some mobility work, do some strengthening of glutes and calves and stuff like that. So, and an overall reaching thing in most runners we see is extreme weakness in the bottom of their feet. And that's kind of where we started with you. So I might just segue into to where we started. So I think a lot of us don't activate the bottom of our feet as well as we should, which then adds strain further up our chain. So into our calf and our Achilles and things like that. Most of us know to do squats and do lunges and to do sideline clams is one that you hear all day long in the running community. But rarely are we told to maybe go walk in the backyard barefoot a little bit and strengthen the bottom of our feet that way, or run on some AstroTurf, or do specific exercises to help strengthen your toe muscles.
And ground yourself in nature, which is important.
I had to slide that in there for you.
Yes, that is important. And so as we progressed through this, it started to... I feel like we mostly, you tell me, my memory is not my best strength. I felt like we somewhat got it under control. I was able to do a good amount. And then the 50-mile race for me was really that kind of turning point where after that, I remember coming into you a few days after that race and you saying, everything feels amazing. You feel like your legs seem to have bounced back really quickly, except that one spot was really angry at me at that point. Was that kind of what you remember as well?
Yeah, I do remember that. I mean, you went into that race fairly healthy. I mean, we had really calmed it down. You had a good build. And then after that is where we started looking at this thing as, okay, you were on your feet for 50 miles. Is part of the pain where the Achilles inserts into that heel bone coming from like a friction syndrome. And I remember we talked with Tom Machad and we were considering cutting out the backs of your shoes, and we're adding felt to the back of the shoe to help decrease the friction. And so we kind of explored. That's where we started right after your race, trying to look at it to see is some of your pain generation just coming from pure friction from the back of your shoe.
But unfortunately it was. I did cut one pair of shoes, do you remember?
We tried.
And it definitely didn't make it feel any better. And that was where, you know, we then tried some conservative methods. I went to see Tom in his office and we did some, I started doing some exercises from him. But, I mean, you know me well enough at this point, we're close friends, that I'm just not someone that can just kind of push pain out of my head and say, I'm just going to run through it. I've never been that way. And so we tried rest. We tried these conservative methods. We tried all kinds of therapies, some of which I think actually made it maybe not worse, but almost stopped the flare, made the flare like continue, even though you had told me like, I don't know if this is going to work. We'll try it. But and I was totally okay with taking that. Yeah. But it did start to reach the point of where one day, I think it was somewhat out of the blue, I came into the gym where you and I were working out with our strength coach, Ryan Lukács, and I was like, I'm going to get surgery. Was it in there that I told you?
I can't hear, but I just remember me and Ryan had about the same response. We were like, we hadn't really talked about this yet. Like, so we had to talk you off the ledge a little bit at that point to make sure that we were making the right decisions, you know.
And from that point, we then took some time to really do, you know, really work on the strength, really work on those areas, get those conservative methods down until we eventually reached a point where I started bringing up surgery more and more. You and I started talking about like the reality of this. Dr. Haytmanek, who is, coming up in this episode, was the person that I was above and beyond recommended by many people for doing a good job of this. But let's talk for you as a medical provider, why it is important when you can reach a point where you say, you're kind of at the end of my skill set here. Like, this is not something I can fix. Like, why is that important to find a provider that can do that and you be able to say that?
Well, yeah, I think remembering that the goals being set in care should be the patient's goals, right? I think even as a provider, it's easy to say, I want this for them or I want that. But if it's not aligning with what that person walked into my office for, we're going to miss a mark. And so oftentimes that's where we start during our first visit. What are your goals here? And me and you had that talk. And I remember talking to you about, if you want to be a recreational runner, do not go this course. You'll be able to go run and you might not race all that well. We don't know, but I also know you and that you do have a passion and you have a journey ahead of you that you want to pursue. And so we thought that it was better to explore these options now rather than to, because we went a whole year of messing with your mileage and doing dry needling and shockwave and exercises and ART and myofascial release. And I mean, the list can go on and on, right? And not everybody, a lot of people who have found success with a certain treatment will make sure to share that with you, we need to remember that what works for one won't work for all. So after that journey of all those things, and after having that conversation and knowing what your goal was, especially after seeing your success at the 50 miler, we decided that you probably should start exploring the option of a lot more aggressive treatment, right? Let's be honest. But with the desired outcome of being able to return back to your sport at a higher level that you desire.
Yes. And it did involve accepting the risk that this is surgery. I specifically remember Ryan saying this to me of like, there's no guarantees with surgery. Like, this, right? Like if you take this choice, you may well come back, but you may well not. And so I was prepared at that point it felt like I wasn't going to be able to do what I wanted to do either way. And so this was the choice that allowed me to have a shot. And so that's where we were at. Was that a hard moment for you you seem to be able to say, I don't know, quite comfortably, which takes a lot of like confidence in yourself to be able to do that.
Yeah. And I think I've learned that from my mentors along the way, right? No one's limitation. And whether that's in practice or in life or as a dad or as a husband, know your limitations. When you don't know, I have a lot of students that come through here and I make sure to share that with them, because if you start, pushing the truth of your knowledge a little bit, people will read through that, and so I'm not a jack of all trades. I do not know it all. And there's a lot of smarter people out there in this world than me. And we luckily had access to them. So let's start bringing those people into the picture and see what we can do with this thing. What
is the most frustrating thing when a situation like this comes in and you can't help anymore? Like, did that bother you at all, that you were like, I really hoped we could calm it down? Well,
of course it does. I think there's, let's be honest, I think we all have the word ego in us to some extent, right? And so we do want to be able to help all, but we got to put that aside. And so I think the most frustrating part is not having enough tools or access to the tools with one's license to be able to do more. But that's, we all take our career paths, and that's where we kind of, we hit a wall at some point.
Is there anything else about that journey to that point that we haven't gone over yet with regards to, just for someone listening to this who is maybe just getting that pain, or they are in the middle of doing this, like, I think we figured something out, or no, it's still not working, like along that progression, anything you would remind that person?
Oh man, that's a great question. I think, we do, as endurance athletes, must remember that there's many different forms of training we can still perform, right? I know when we're in a big build or where we want to be only a runner that you want to run. I'm aware of that. But we must remember that there's other forms of cardio that'll keep you fit as you go through injuries and things like that. And yes, the next finish line is your goal, but what's your finish line in life, right? How far do you want to go on this journey of sport? Can we piece people back together quickly? Yes. I think we see that like at the collegiate level, right? They get hurt. They're back the next week. They found a way, professional level even. But as a non-professional athlete, we need to know that if we want to do this for a long time, we might have to take short-term sacrifice.
That's so important. And I'm glad that you said as a non-professional athlete, because I do want this episode to be for the many people who have reached out to me who are struggling with this, but struggling because they're like, well, I'm not an athlete. I'm not trying to win a race, so I don't deserve to, think about my long-term future because I should just not run if I can't run. What would you say to that person?
Yeah, I think, oh man, you're stumping me on that one. I think though that like,
well, put it in your shoes. If you had this, would you want to get it taken care of? I've never asked you this question.
Comparison steals all joy, right? I can't even imagine, right? Because we didn't feel your pain. We didn't know what you were going through, as you were trying to put together a race schedule, as you're working, through your fitness. I mean, what one feels, another cannot always endure, right? So, I've never been to the professional level. And so initially my knee-jerk reaction is I would have probably, if it would have stayed at a plateaued level of pain, I probably would have kept pushing on a little bit more. I think that that's my personality too, a little bit,
really?
At times. But I also knew that I wasn't going out to race to win really anything.
But do you think someone who has got to the point where it is really debilitating, they're not winning races, they just want to do these races, but they are struggling to walk to the grocery store? Or are those people as worthy of taking a long-term approach of this as someone who wants to?
If they are willing to improve their quality of life, then yes, they need to be looking at this journey, right? I don't think many of us should be going through pain as we're walking through the grocery store on a daily basis, right? We should be able to take our kids to the playground and be able to stand there and push them on the swing without many symptoms, right? And so, yeah, I mean, if their quality of life or activities of daily living are compromised, then I would for sure be pushing that person.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any last things you want to remind people?
Just that these things do show up. There's no one answer to when these things come up. I know Tina really wanted answers, and it's one of those that most of these things come over a prolonged period of time of whether that's altered mechanics, weaknesses in certain muscle groups and things like that. And so when people show up in my office, they want an answer, and it is hard not always giving them that answer. We can, especially
when they bully you like I do.
Right. We can have all the hypotheses in the world, but we can't always answer that. So we got to take that person from where they're at when they walk in and figure out how do we not go back to where we were moving forward. So when these things arise, I would recommend seeking help, even if it's just for an exam, and recommendations that can go a long way by a trusted person in your community.
And I want to encourage people to go to runcare.org. My friend Kyle Bowling set that up, and it's got running passionate or running people who work with runners in any location in the US. I may even be international. So you can type in your zip code and it will find someone near you. If you live in St. Louis, active STL, Brennan is here. Okay, so on a scale of 1 to crazy, where am I at now?
Yeah, you've taken a good approach at this thing, right? I think I even saw you afterwards, and my exact words were, "You just seem like you're in a good spot."
I quoted it on social media.
Yeah, and so it is amazing though that we can remember that when we are in a bad spot, there's light at the end of a tunnel too.
So true. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank
awesome.
you. It's important to me that the supplements I take are of the highest quality, and that's why for almost 6 years I've been drinking AG1. Unlike many supplement brands, AG1 is researched and developed by an in-house team of scientists, doctors, nutritionists with decades of experience in their respective fields. So many people have asked me if I do actually take AG1 every day, and if I do believe in the product, and trust me, there is a reason I've been with them for so long. Quality for AG1 isn't a buzzword. It is a commitment backed by expert-led scientific research, high-quality ingredients, industry-leading manufacturing, and rigorous testing. At every step of the process, AG1 goes above and beyond industry standards. I know I can trust what's in every scoop of AG1 because they obsess over product quality. The standards of manufacturing partners and sustainable practices are unparalleled, and I just really admire the extra above and beyond that they do to make sure that is the case. Taking care of my health shouldn't be complicated, and AG1 simplifies this by covering my nutritional bases and setting myself up for success in 60 seconds. One scoop, once a day, in water, and that's all you need to do. That covers all your bases. I have been using it obsessively during my recovery time to make sure my body heals, but I use it all the time. AG1's ingredients are heavily researched for efficacy and quality, and I love that every scoop also includes folate, magnesium, and ashwagandha for stress support, which my body is needing as it is in healing period. So if you want to replace your multivitamin and more, start with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3 plus K2 and 5 free travel packs with your first subscription at drinkag1.com/Tina. That's drinkag1.com/Tina. Check it out. I really admire the way Dr. Brennan was able to say, I've done what I can. This is the end of my road. We need to find you someone else. That takes a lot of courage and a lot of confidence in your skills to be able to say that. So next up, we have Stephanie Howe, a professional trail and ultra athlete for the North Face. Let's check in with her. Stephanie, my friend, my twin. Not in real life for people listening. We just call each other twin, and I absolutely love it. Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Okay, so I said we call each other twin. I was thinking about this the other day. It's probably coming up on 10 years.
Yeah, I think so.
Which I love.
How it even started, but that's just how I know you.
I know, yeah. When people ask me about that, I'm like, we just seem to live very parallel lives, which is more to the point with this what we're going to talk about today, because, when I said that I had a Haglund's deformity, you immediately messaged me and you were like, oh, I'm so sorry. I have some things to say. And then in a later voice memo, there were many of them of you and I going back and forth, which is part of why this episode came about. You said, well, we're twins. Of course, our lives are following the same trajectory. So can you go ahead and tell the listeners a little bit about, what would you like to say about who Stephanie is and what you're passionate about?
Yeah, I've been a runner most of my life, but a trail ultra runner professionally for the last 11 years, which is crazy now. Run for the North Face, and I've done a lot of the longer big ultras in our sport, Western States, UTMB, Lake Sonoma, just a number of big ultra long races. And I really love it. I love being out in the mountains. I have a PhD in nutrition and exercise science. So I work as a coach and a sport nutritionist. So I'm like really, really involved in the area. I love it from both sides, personally and professionally. And then I'm also a mom. I've got a 3-year-old. And so that has been a fun new addition to my life, but the best.
Thank you for sharing that. And so many important elements, especially as you said, mama being your most important, your favorite one. I wasn't sure. I didn't tell you I was going to ask about this, but you and I, when we had talked before on the podcast, although now I'm thinking about it, might have been my previous podcast. we had talked about Red S, about amenorrhea, about my body was struggling at the time. And part of me does wonder if Haglund's, for me, has some tie-in to my past of not fueling my body in the way that I could have. I have no background on that. There's nothing to support that. But part of me wonders if for me, there was something to do with that. First, any thoughts on that from what you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, it's multifactorial, we know for sure. I think genetics play a big part of it. The shape of your foot, your gait pattern, obviously fueling and training comes into that, of putting more stress on your body. So I think there's like various arms of this, and like some are probably bigger than others. There's not just like one reason, like you got this, right? You didn't get this. It's like things in your life set you up to be predisposed, and then you maybe push yourself to that point. Yep.
Thank you for that reminder. Good. Okay. So then with you and your own journey, can you tell us about when you first really started noticing that you had this pain in your foot?
Yeah, it's been a long journey. So it was probably 2014. Leading into my first Western states, I just noticed I had some stiffness. And it wasn't pain, but it was like my Achilles and heel kind of hurt. And I made it through the race. It was a great race. And it didn't really bother me after, but the subsequent months to years after that, it was just always, I could run and then I would be limping. It would just like, as soon as I got started running, it was absolutely fine. So I like could work through it pretty well. But as soon as I would stop, it would be like the wrath of my foot. It would just lock up and then I would just limp around all day. And I think I put up with that for a couple of years, and which is the usual, right? Like we don't want to like succumb to surgery. That's like way off there.
Was someone telling you that at that point? Yeah,
I had a great physio, and obviously they're not going to push you into surgery. So we tried a lot of things, rest, manual therapies, just like really, really basic things. And for me, it wasn't really it was a huge issue, but I could still train and I could still race, and I was racing well. So I kind of just like let that be like a pebble in my shoe of like, just like really bothered me, but yet wasn't stopping me. And I think the first time I actually like realized like this is a problem was probably 2016. I'm like, I can't live like this. And it was more not the running side, but just the life side of things, because it really impacts your quality of life, because you can't do anything because you're going to limp. I remember sitting on the couch and having to go to the bathroom and just being like, I don't want to get up and walk across the room because I know how much it's going to hurt. And what would that be like if that didn't hurt? And thinking of like fast forwarding 20 years into life and having this pain, I was just like, I can't do this. And that's when I really started to search out options. Got a little bit desperate, like if somebody says they can help you, you want to try everything conservative first. So I tried Shockwave, I tried PRP, I tried some of like the other like electric device. I don't even know what they were all called. I mean, I was literally desperate. And, I went so far as to think about like stem cells and like, could that be something? And did a little bit of research, and there had been a few other runners. I knew Lauren Fleshman fairly well because she lived in Oregon. I was in Oregon, and she had this procedure on her foot from a doctor in Sweden. And so I kind of looked it up, and I was like, oh, this sounds great. It's really less invasive. You can get back to running in like 6 weeks. And to me, that was like super attractive. And so my first surgery was, I think, in 2016, very minimal. I was awake, just made a little incision, shaved down a little bit of the bone, cleaned up the tendon, sewed it back up. And then I was like, good to go and recover. And I did thrive after that one for about a year and a half. It was great. I was running, it wasn't painful, but then it came back, and it came back like full on and like almost worse than it was before surgery. And I just didn't expect that because I had had like a full year of running really well. And so I emailed him. Obviously, he's in Sweden. He was like, you got to come back. So I came back. He did another minor surgery, just cleaned up the tendon a little bit. And then I was running again, like, I don't know, a couple months later, had like 4 good months. And then it came back. And at this point, I was just like devastated. I had just spent like, I'd had 2 surgeries. And so I went to Stedman Clinic trying to get answers. And that's where I met Dr. Haytmanek. And I remember this vividly. I walked into his room. He had my MRI of my foot up on the screen. And he was like, Stephanie, your problem is super simple. You've got this bone here. You need surgery. And I burst into tears. I was like, why do you think your surgery is going to be better? I've had 2 already. Like, why is this going to solve my problem? And he explained it. I looked at it. We talked some more. And I really just was like to the point of like, I need to trust this person and just like dive in head first. Because this is what he does. He does it very well. The Stedman Clinic is like known for doing these big surgeries, specialty surgeries on athletes. And so I just was like, you know what do I have to lose? And so that was, I believe, 2019, where I went and got my left foot. We can talk more about my right foot after that.
Yeah. Okay. So then, that's 2014 to 2019. That's a long time to be dealing with this. I want to, just because with your right foot, you'd already been through this process. So that's less of a conversation. And then we'll talk about your after in a minute. Let's talk to the people out there. Like, okay, what I was maybe 6-8 months ago when you and I were talking, where someone listening is saying, well, this person has told me I need to get PRP, or I just need to do this round of shockwave, or I've got a new strength training coach and we think we figured it out. What would you say to that person who is, or like I was also, okay, let's backtrack before that. First off, you said about rest. What did you mean by rest? Just give people examples of, you're not saying, I took a week off and then tried again. Like, explain what you mean by rest.
Yeah, I took 3 months off from December of that, I guess it would have been 2015, all the way until March. I did not run a step. I did some cross training, and not like cross training like I was trying to stay in shape. I ski, and so I skied in the winter, and then tried to get back to running. It like made absolutely no difference, like none at all. Maybe slightly like day to day, like waking up and walking around the house, but it really didn't help the pain. And then when I started to run again, it was just like the exact same.
Well, I think the other example of that is obviously when you said about the other 2 surgeries, like you would have taken a minimum of 6 weeks. I'm guessing with, maybe even a bit more, but you took that time off and it did feel good for a little while and then it came back. And I think that's the biggest example here of, and I told you this myself. I said, well, I've taken chunks of time off. I've built incredibly slowly back up in my mileage. I've not done this. I've backed off that. And I felt like I was trying all these conservative things that, like, you and I would talk every time. I'd be like, nope, I think we figured it out. Like, I think it's going to be okay. And I could feel you in the back being like, okay.
I know. I don't know.
Make your own mistake.
Some of that, those conversations, because I know you and I wanted you to get past this. So I think I gave you a little tough love.
You did. You definitely did. And I needed it.
Why do you think this is conservative treatment is going to help? And I think to some extent you have to try some things on your own, right? Because you can't just take somebody else's word. But what I wanted to do for you and for other people is to prevent the 5 years of just like ups and downs, and like this physical pain that I went through, to finally arrive at the right answer, because I was so confused and I didn't know who to trust, what to believe. I didn't understand the injury. And now I think I understand it pretty well. And I want to be able to help other people so that they can move on with their lives.
Yes. And that's exactly what you had said to me of like, the other side isn't perfect, but it is so much better. And every person I have spoken to, and I was very diligent with my calling. Like I spoke, Zach Miller said the same thing. Like things aren't perfect, but they are much better. And look how well Zach has been running over the last few years. Noah Droddy, a marathoner, he was another person who went ahead and did the surgery after doing what you did, of 5 years of back and forth and stopping and starting. And there's so many athletes out there who I know of who are in that current phase of back and forth. And it eats away at your soul. You start getting excited. You start thinking that you maybe finally have got past this. Maybe it's happy now. And then it comes right back. Okay. So then what I was going to say earlier about the other modalities. So for someone who has been told, my strength coach has figured something out. My physio says I should get PRP. I've heard about this new 10x procedure, like these smaller ways, as you said, we all don't want to do surgery. So like you're trying to find ways to avoid that. What would you say to that person there?
Yeah, they're all like ideas, and like, let's say strength training, that's a very benign one, right? A piece of the puzzle, perhaps a gait pattern, perhaps that will help in the future. But a lot of these treatments are just like, they're not really proven in a way to like actually fix the underlying issue. They may fix the symptom for a while, but I just go back to like when Haytmanek put my foot up on the wall, like, see this bone? It's not going away. It was very clear to me that, none of these things were going to help that problem, the underlying issue. So in some ways, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And when you know what is causing the pain, which you pretty much have to do an MRI to figure out, like, if it's tissue, if it's tendon, if it's bone, then it becomes pretty clear. And I don't say that in a way of like trying to oversimplify it, because when you're vulnerable, you want to believe someone. You want to believe someone who says, yes, this PRP, this is going to solve your issue. And, when you use really scientific words, or, say like, this has been shown in these studies. I mean, I have a background in science, and even I was confused and like looking through all of the literature and evidence. So it's overwhelming. But also remember that each person is a specialty in their own area. So obviously each person thinks they can solve it. But you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt and go back to like, what is the impetus? Like, what is causing this pain?
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually, same as you, seeing, I'm so glad I like recorded it at the moment when he was explaining it. And like when I saw the bone, you're like, well, no, that is irritating my Achilles. Like, of course it's mad. Of course it's like shredded up. Like it really, and then seeing the after, I was like, whoa, the difference between the two. So as you said, the MRI speaks to itself. You obviously have to have someone who can read it. And I do want to add a piece in here. We are obviously, you and I are both huge fans of Stedman. I mean, I'm in an early stage. As we are recording this right now, I'm not even 4 weeks post-surgery. But the relief I feel in knowing that I did what, as we just said with the bone, I took away the source of what was bothering my foot. Has given me huge relief. Like I am already able to bike for an hour. I was able to do that 2 weeks post-surgery. I was allowed to start biking, building up to an hour. I am a few days away from walking around for an hour without the boot on. Like that's pretty impressive turnaround. And so, we are obviously both big fans of Steadman, but also I think I do want to talk about just in general, if we remove Steadman from the picture, again, I want to add that I've said many times, Stephanie and I both paid for this. Neither of us got like a free thing.
This is paid out of pocket. My insurance.
You paid out of pocket. My insurance, it was in network. But this is not like an ad, basically, is what I'm trying to say. But even if someone doesn't go there, what would be your advice for seeking out someone who does know what they're doing, or knows this area well enough? Like, how would you go about that for someone who just maybe cannot justify going out there and it's not in network?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I think makes a big difference. I mean, if you want somebody operating on your foot, you want somebody who does these regularly, who has seen this, who isn't like, oh, wow, this is like, what is this? Like, this is like a novel surgery for them. Something routine where they know what they are doing. They've done lots of athletes or people who are active, because that's a different subset of population. That does change probably some of the techniques, and somebody who, that you want a confident surgeon, but you want someone who's realistic. So if they tell you like, I'm going to fix this and it's going to be like perfect forever. And like, is that true? I don't know. Like, have good conversations, like challenge what they say, ask them like how much they have done this surgery, like, on a regular basis. Does the hospital do research? Like, what is basically their qualifications for doing this specific type of surgery? Because I do know people who have gone to the convenient space, the convenient hospital, and had it done. And it's just like, turned out to be like kind of my first experience of like, it comes back, or they have additional problems, and you want to avoid that as much as possible.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. All right. I want to make sure we get a few minutes on, the other side. What was your experience once you had that surgery? You took the time that you needed to let it heal. Then what? Let's go from like 3 months post-surgery.
So I was sort of expecting a similar trajectory to my first, like the minimal surgeries, where I could like get back to running pretty quickly. That was not the case. I'm just going to be totally honest. Mm-hmm. I struggled with pain and stiffness post-surgery for about 6 months. And then I felt like I kind of broke through, made a little breakthrough of like, okay, I can run, but not like I want to run. And I would say it was a little frustrating to be like, oh, why isn't this working? Like, why am I struggling? But the other thing, you're going to talk about Anna a little bit. She's the PT, like with Steadman Clinic, and I would message her, and she helped me build a progression plan and just kind of talked to me through like, okay, this is normal. Like, maybe we need to load it like 2 days in a row or 3 days in a row hard, and then 2 days off. And so I kind of like worked my way through that. And I would say at around a year was when I felt like, oh yeah, like I'm not limping in between, or I'm not thinking about it, or it's not like the limiting factor for my runs. So it takes a long time, but for me, I just had to trust the process. This was like, my last shot. I wasn't going to go somewhere else. And it did come around, but it wasn't without frustration. And then I have had the surgery on my other side, right? So same experience of like, didn't feel good for about 6 months. At a year, I finally turned a corner. And honestly, like at 2 years, I think I turned another corner of like just having it just kind of be there sometimes, but not be something that worries me. And I know that sounds like a big time frame to like get back to yourself. But when you think of like the alternative of like limping through life, it goes by pretty quickly and you do see progress.
When you say, it's still there, but it's, doesn't worry you. What did you mean by that?
Yeah. So for example, I did a race in Japan like 2 weeks ago. And I had a bit of flat running before then. So it was a little bit irritated. And I did the race and it was like swollen after and I was limping. I was like, oh gosh. But the difference is after like 5 or 10 minutes of like warming up, I could walk without limping. And then 3 days later, it was fine.
Okay.
So in the previous edition of my foot, that would have continued on for a week to a month of just like being like red and swollen and angry. Whereas now it was like pretty stiff and upset, but I gave it a couple days to recover and I'm back to running again and it's not bothering me.
Yeah. And I will say, I think like Zach said a very similar thing to that in that, you know, sometimes it does in the days after it's pretty sore, but it doesn't stop him from training. It doesn't stop him from racing anymore, which, you know, was definitely something that every time you are running with a Haglund and you're running a race, you are weighing the consequences of the other side.
Yeah. The other piece that I really noticed, and this is to me like the best part of it, is I don't think about it between runs. So even after that race, like once I got it warmed up, I could like go play with Julian or like I could walk across the room or, you know, right now I'm not like worried about like walking to get the mail where that was a thing in the past. And like, that's so nice to have those like, you know, your quality of life returns.
Yes. Okay. Any last things you want to add for people listening, just from everything you've learned about this year experience, or some words you would want to leave people with?
Surgery can be scary, but it can also be amazing. So be open to it. Ask a lot of questions. Do your research. You don't want to just trust somebody's word, but also know that it can get better. Like you don't have to just live through this and be in pain every day. And both of us are here as like examples to, you know, if you have questions, I'm sure you're open to it as well, to like send us a message and happy to share, I guess, my journey of how I got here. But yeah, I think it's like, just be open to the possibility that you might have to put running aside for a few months, maybe even up to a year. But it's so worth it if you can come out the other side and just be in a much better place.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And I think, you know, I'm almost the example of that in what you just said there, in that even I trust you. I trusted you immensely. From the first time you told me about the surgery, I went into the gym and talked to I work out with my chiropractor, Brennan, who was the previous guest on this, and my strength coach. And I was like, I'm going to get the surgery. And they were like, what? Excuse me? So I trust you immensely to where I flipped my entire brain. But then I, even with that trust in you, had to kind of flip back and forth and figure it out for myself. So as you said, Stephanie, it is okay to find your own path. But yeah, once you start reaching the point where it's really wearing you down mentally, for me, I don't think I ever truly got there because I've never been someone that likes, I just can't run through pain. There's something I can run through pain, like running pain, but like an injury pain, I've always just been ingrained to like do something about it. But I still had to try this, try that, and that's okay. But if you're at that like desperation point, I hope Stephanie's words, this episode is reassuring to you that there is another side and it is worth it. So thank you so much for sharing with us. Appreciate all the panicked voice memos I've sent you over the last year.
Oh no, it's great. And I'm just happy that you were on the other side now.
Yes, thank you so much. I wouldn't have done it without you. So I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Of course.
You've heard me talking about precision for a while, and I know it has been almost a year since I did my last ultra. I'm looking forward to hopefully getting back into it by the end of the year, depending on how my recovery goes, but so far, so good. And in my last ultra and in my future ultras, I intend on using precision. I could not fault it with my last ultra, with many of the marathons that I have run. I am so glad that I finally understand how much fuel I need per hour, how many gels I need, how many carbs I need. A lot of that is thanks to Precision and the free fuel and hydration planner that they have made. They've made it ready for you. You do not have to use any particular thing. You could just go in there, plug your information in, and they will figure it out for you. There's also free consultations if you want to take up that opportunity. You can go to a link in the show notes if you want to check that out. But for today, I just want to remind you that fueling, that getting your hydration right, is the most critical part of running a race to your potential, of getting that goal, getting that, whatever that is that you are working towards, that is lighting your heart on fire. That is the key. And Precision makes it so easy for you. Their 30-gram carb gels go down so easy. You don't need water. They just slip straight down. I actually genuinely enjoy taking them, not even including the gel part of it. I would just happily eat them as is, as do the chews. Their flavors are not particularly powerful. They're very easy to take down. You don't get flavor fatigue. And then when it comes to the electrolytes, something that is critical for us runners, they have varying different levels. Again, use that free planner to figure out what you need. You, as a friend of mine, can get yourself 15% off at precisionfuelandhydration.com by using code Tina Sent Me. Use code Tina Sent Me to get yourself 15% off at precisionfuelandhydration.com. There's also links in the show notes. Go check out those gels, go check out the chews and the electrolytes. You're going to love it in your next race, and I can't wait to hear more. Thanks for listening. I know that part might have been hard to hear, and I hope it came across that at times I was very much in the same position she was, and the position she had been as well, of saying, nope, I don't want to do this. This seems too extreme. This is scary. I'm going to try and do this on my own. I'm going to try and be conservative. And while that might have been hard to hear, I encourage you to listen on. Even if you're not ready yet, it might take you a while. You do it when it is right time for you, but at least to learn more about this, to go deeper into this. There are some parts of this interview coming that I didn't even know, and it was fascinating to learn more. So let's go next to Dr. Thomas Haytmanek, an award-winning orthopedic surgeon and foot and ankle specialist. Tommy, thank you so much for joining me today on the Running for a Podcast, your first podcast. I'm excited that you are here.
Thank you for having the opportunity to chat with you, or give me the opportunity. This is it's fun to catch up with you and talk a little bit about what you've been through and hear it from your perspective, Tina.
Now that I'm not crying.
It tends to be emotional. I get what the relationship and what I end up talking to people about is hard, and that happens. But the good news is here you are laughing about it. I am. Moving on.
But even the last time I saw you at my checkup, I was holding back tears. But now I feel like I've fully processed it.
You were quiet, that's for sure. But okay.
Yeah, no, I'm an emotional person, and I own that. I think before my surgery was definitely on the most emotional I have been, but that's not surprising. I told you I don't like things going into my skin, so this was like the ultimate thing that I was struggling with. But already I am. I was saying to friends that even more than my 2 pregnancies, partially probably because your life is turned so upside down by having children, I just felt total awe of my body over the last 3 weeks, like absolute disbelief in how quickly it heals. I really just feel amazed at it, and it's really given me a whole new respect for my body already. So thank you for that.
Well, as you were alluded to, your body has an incredible propensity to heal. It wants to heal. Our job is to set you up to do that. And you took good care of yourself. You said you've never slept more, and you were organized, and you had everything. You had alluded to that, and it looked perfect when we saw it a week ago or so.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
So you did all of the things right, and yes, the human body has a incredible capacity to heal.
Yeah, it really is amazing. So I want this conversation here to be for runners who have reached the point or are considering, they're really struggling with particularly a Haglund's deformity, but if we have time, we may go on to, any common other running injuries that you come across. But particularly a Haglund's deformity, they have been trying all the conservative methods. They've been playing this cat and mouse game of, can I get to a start line of a race? No, I can't. It's flared up. Can I try again? No, it's bothering me. Oh, I've got something I want to try. Maybe this will work. Oh, it doesn't. For someone who has got to that point, that's what I want to focus on for this part of the conversation. But first off, in your perspective, we've gone over it earlier in this episode, but from what you see, what is a Haglund's deformity, and is that all the issue that is causing the pain in runners?
So, yeah, I think a couple of things, Tina, if I can just frame a little bit, if you don't mind, if I back up just one step. When we talk about Achilles tendonitis and problems in your heel, Achilles tendonitis really comes in two flavors. There is something called non-insertional Achilles tendonitis, which is not what you had, but that is common in runners. And then there is insertional Achilles tendonitis. That is a little bit more common in runners. That is what you had, and that is the Haglund's deformity and the problem, which is the problem with the bone and the problem with the tendon. So, the Achilles tendon comes down, inserts onto the bone or the back of the calcaneus, and provides an incredible amount of force, right? 3 times body weight when you're running. So quite a lot of force is going through that tendon. What can happen is you can develop problems. You can develop some irritation. You can develop some partial tearing that starts to happen. And then you try to repair it, right? Every night I tell people when we're resting overnight, those times we're trying to heal those things. And you can just get out of balance with the healing versus the amount of damage that you accumulate during the day, be it just walking around or running as you do. So there really are 2 problems. To answer your question more directly, there's a problem with the bone. The bone reacts to that inflammation in that area and starts to grow. That is what is termed the Haglund's deformity. That is a larger increase in bone in the area where the Achilles tendon inserts. The Achilles tendon itself, if we look at it under a microscope, in the area of insertional Achilles tendonitis, has inflammation, has your body's trying to heal, but it's not quite able to do it. And there's a lot of inflammation there. So it is both a bone and a tendon problem. A common question is, well, which came first? Did I have the tendon problem that led to the bone, or was the bone getting irritated? And I'll tell you that I don't know for sure, and I don't think anyone knows for sure. But by the time you have pain, and we tend to see people for this, they have both bone and tendon problems.
So with that, like building up of the bone, and I was quite surprised seeing it on the MRI when you pointed it out to me of like, that actually is a decent sized chunk of bone there. When this is building up, like how long of a period of time, obviously it depends on the person, how big it is. How long of a period of time are we talking here for it to build up enough to bother someone?
Yeah, I think the right answer is years. It is certainly not weeks or months, and not decades, right? That would be too long. This is usually starts to build over 2 or 3 years. You notice maybe a little bit of pain. You took a week off, it goes away. You're back to your training regimen and you're going. And then all of a sudden it's bothering you again. And it gets worse and worse and worse, as you alluded to, right? And then you get into that kind of cat and mouse game. But it's over years. And we do think that the upstream cause, one of the main sort of problems with this is tightness in your calf. And so as you experience, we always check the calf, because some people can have, especially our runners, they have really well-developed calves. Right? If you look down at your leg, I always describe to people, we don't have a lot of muscle up front. We have a whole lot of muscle in the back because we walk forward. And so we can get tight in our calves. Now, you did not have a tightness in your calf, right? Some people do, but not everyone does. Some people just run a lot and they pull, and the tendon gets this kind of imbalance. The bone reacts to that inflamed tendon. Perhaps it's the other way around. We think the bone's reacting to the inflamed tendon. And then you get into this situation where we're having a lot of pain and just discomfort, and it's hard to get on top of.
I just want to clarify that. You said you suspect or you think it is the bone is reacting to the tendon, not the bone is rubbing on the tendon.
I think depending on, they do rub. So I do think they rub. The question is, why is it growing? Right. So I think there are certain positions where certainly when you're plantar flexing and dorsiflexing, it starts to rub. That irritates the tendon. The tendon's irritating the bone. And that's that kind of chicken and egg phenomenon. So I think the bone is reacting to some of the inflammation of the tendon really right where it inserts. Again, I can't tell you which came first, the chicken or the egg, because they're existing together once it becomes painful enough for us to be talking about it, or a patient to come in and see us in the office.
Yeah. And once someone gets to the point where they are at that just desperation point of where they think, I can't keep doing this. This is heartbreaking. I mean, the amount of social media messages I've had from people, even in the few weeks since, saying, I've been dealing with this for 10 years. It's driving me crazy. I can't even walk anymore. I can't play with my kids. I cut holes in all my shoes. All these measures, that anything to try and make it go away. Rest doesn't work, as you told me. Well, let's speak to the rest part. For someone who thinks, okay, well, if, like I said to you, if you told me right now, and I said this to you in my consult with you, if you told me to take 1 year off, nothing, I would do it. And what did you say back?
Well, you can do that, but when you start to run again, it's going to be better for a while. I don't remember exactly what I said, but what I anticipate saying, or what I would tell you today, is you're going to be better for a while. Sure, you're going to feel better if you're not running, and I can put you in a cast, put you in a boot, you can stop running, you can do all those things. You're going to be better for a while. And then as you start to ramp up again, you have this tendon that has the propensity to become inflamed, and you've already built a little bit of bone. So I anticipate we'll be in the same situation. So to answer your question, and it's a great question, and people struggle with this and they don't know what to do, right? And how do you move forward? What should I do? Well, we want to try the easy things first, for sure, right? And for me, that's a silicone heel cup, which elevates the heel ever so slightly. Those are just an online thing. If you Google it, there's lots of different places you can do that. Stretching the calf, kind of the runner stretch where you're pushing on the wall. Great thing to do. And then trying something like a night splint. So it's a little device that holds the foot up at night. So kind of 90-degree thing. And that could be really useful at night to keep that stretching that you did during the day. So we're talking surgery stuff because that's what we did and that's what I do. But I do want everyone to know to why we're talking about all this is these people are struggling with this stuff. Certainly there are some easy things out there. Calf stretching, heel lifts slightly. Now you have to couple that with stretching or you're going to get tighter. If all you do is offload it by elevating the heel, you're going to get tighter and tighter and tighter. So you have to couple the heel lifts with the stretching and then try a night splint. And then it becomes, and we try that. It's not a 1 week thing, right? It's a 6 or 8 week or years is what it sounded like really for you, Tina, going back and forth. And then the conversation gets a little bit more difficult, right? And that's the conversation that you and I had. And in our world, doing surgery on these things, right, we have a lot of anxiety about people getting back to what they want to do. Sometimes, as you alluded to when we've been talking before this podcast, is it's hard for people, especially high-level runners, but lots of runners, to go and talk to someone who wants to do a surgery on them because we, as the surgeons, are nervous that you're not going to get back to running. My perspective is, and I think that's why you and I met, Tina, is that, well, if you tell me, Tommy, I run a lot, I'm a professional runner, and I can't run, well, we're at a place where it's probably reasonable to do something, right? There is no guarantees, right? In medicine, we don't know exactly what we're going to get. But I do know if you can't do what you want to do or need to do, not terribly unreasonable to try a surgery. And that's how I've wound up meeting some neat people like yourself, treating this condition.
And that's, I think, probably the key thing here is I had to ask myself the question of, was I prepared to, I knew I could get away. I could tell I could get away with probably running. And I understand this is obviously relative. As someone who used to run 90 miles a week, for me, I could not do 70 with this. Couldn't even get close to 70 miles in a week. But I knew I could do 30. And I had to ask myself, was I prepared for that to be my potential future? Was I prepared to let go of some of these things, rim to rim to rim, as an example, something I want to do at some point? Would I ever be able to do that with this situation? And I came to the realization the answer was no. And so I still have a lot of professional goals I want to get, a lot of things I want to chase as a runner and, push the boundary. And it just became clear to me that was not going to happen. And I was not ready to kind of say, well, I'm 35 years old. I wasn't ready to be like, okay, well, guess that's it then. And so I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that is one of the scary parts here of recognizing that you have to kind of weigh that for yourself. Maybe you are comfortable with saying, you know what, I'll just cut back and run easy every time. I'm okay with that. Kick the can down the road. I'll deal with it if I want to. But yeah, for me and for many listening, especially those who are messaging me saying, I'm so frustrated, I just really have these things I want to do, then maybe it's time to get a second opinion.
And that's exactly the decision point. Are you okay with where you are? Obviously, no surgery is a nice way to go. It's cheaper. There's no risk for infection, right? It doesn't hurt, right? And so there's all those things that you can do. But if you, and every person is different. If you say, I'm not happy with where I am now, and I have done all of these things, and you did it tons and you did a great physical therapist, you did all of the things, then I think it's very reasonable to entertain. We never quite know where you're going to get. And we're doing this now at a point where you're 3-4 weeks out and we don't know. I hope that we're high-fiving and that you get to a point where you're doing all the things that you want to do. We don't know. But we do know that we weren't happy with where we were. And you said, I'm willing to take on all of these, these unknowns for the pretty good upside. I mean, we do think, obviously, I think that you're going to do well and you will go back to running and doing all of those things, but, we don't know for sure. But that is the decision. And that's what people have trouble with, right? And making those decisions. And that is hard. And for every person, to your point, Tina, is different. Some people say, fine, I'll run 30 miles a week. Some people say, no, I really want to run 90. And so I'm willing to take this on with the hopes of getting as close to 90 as I can. And I hope it's 90. We'll see.
Okay, so with that, we talked about, there is no guarantee. There is no promise. I don't know what the other side is going to hold. As we said, you're confident, but I'm confident, but we never know. For someone who is feeling scared with just the concept of surgery, like removing the outcome from the picture, anything you would say to that person?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's prudent, right, to be a little bit anxious about surgery. I think that is, I certainly wouldn't tell anyone, no, don't have any anxiety about this. This is totally, there should be some appropriate amount of thinking that goes into this. I think doing this a lot, I do a lot of surgery and so I'm around it every day. So I probably have my threshold's a little bit lower. But there is a small risk for infection, about 1%. And then there's some discomfort around the time of surgery. I think the days of being worried about getting anesthesia and kind of these huge unknowns that am I going to make it through the surgery? I mean, that I feel very confident telling you is in our past. Just as a society, like you're going to be fine. Are you going to get the outcome that you want? Are we going to get you back to 9 miles? Yeah, I think we are, but I can't guarantee that. But in terms of the acute surgery, I think be appropriately concerned, but it is quite safe these days. The risks are quite low. And that is one of those hurdles. I can't remember if we had this conversation or not, but I talk about surgery like a series of hurdles. And that is the first hurdle, right? So the first thing you need to do is, wake up in the recovery room, make sure your pain's controlled, go to the bathroom, make sure you can tolerate some food and you're not too nauseous. And all of those things, again, have gotten much better over the years. The medicines are better. And I'm not an anesthesiologist or great at knowing all of that, but that stuff really is pretty reliable now. The next hurdle, starting to put weight on it and starting physical therapy, right? And getting the sutures out. And then the next hurdle is getting back to some weight bearing and then more and more and more. And so I describe it as a series of hurdles because I just think it's a comforting way or a nice way to think about your progress. Because where you are, you're going to say, well, I still have some more hurdles to go, but gosh, I made it over the first 2 or 3 big hurdles. And then you feel like you're moving forward, which I think is a really nice thing to do, right? And feel like every week I'm making a little bit of progress. And that's part of why our protocols, as you're working through now, are designed where every couple of days you're doing a little more, so you can feel that forward progress. We're trying to load the tendon in a way that it heals. It gets used to the strain that we're putting on it, not putting too much or having it rupture or pull off or something bad. But we're constantly showing it more stress so that your body reacts to one of your early points. The body has an incredible capacity to heal, and we're just trying to set it up for that. And then you feel mentally better because I'm slowly getting better. Last week I wasn't putting any weight on it. Now I'm at 50%. By the end of next week, I'm going to be at 100%. I'm going to wean out of my boot, and that's going to feel great to walk around in some sneakers. So those are all, while we can do all those things. So it's a mental win as much as it is a physical improvement in your heel. So that's kind of the backstory.
Absolutely. And I think it's been interesting. A lot of people have expected me to be really struggling in this time and come up to me and been like, how you doing? I'm like, honestly, I'm great. I'm enjoying this. Like, as you said, each day is kind of building a little bit more, get to do a little bit more, get to see the improvement. And I know that there is going to be many hard days ahead. But I really do. I am appreciating that, as opposed to knowing that you've taken care of it now, as opposed to when you do these other things, you're kind of like holding your breath, crossing your fingers, like, please work, please work, please work. And so it's just like, I've got many people who've reached out to me saying about PRP injections. They've had them. They can't run for X number of days, weeks, months. They're frustrated. Doesn't seem to be working. And they still have the issue at hand. So I really am feeling confident about this period, just because, as you said, it's building day by day. I'm on my way, and that's feels much better than I did 6 months ago.
Well, and that's the advantage to what we're doing these days, to your point, when people being nervous about surgery. And surgery has changed. Not only are the medicines and being nauseous after surgery and worry about waking up and all those things are not very relevant anymore. We're pushing you along faster because our fixation techniques are better. Surgery is just better, right? Before maybe 15 years ago or so, you were in a cast for 6 weeks after this surgery.
Wow.
And we've changed that, right? We've been able to push. Our fixation techniques are better. Our surgery is better. So now, 6 weeks, you're going to be walking in regular shoes, unassisted, right? And so that is a huge difference compared to being casted for 6 weeks. You atrophy, your leg gets thin. You have to get all that muscle back. The ankle is going to be stiff, and we're avoiding all of that now.
Yeah.
Again, none of this is perfect and none of this is guaranteed, but we feel very confident being able to do that. And that has really allowed, to your point, you to do this, right? And that changes the scales a little bit as you're thinking about, is this something that I'm willing to take on, or am I not willing to, something I'm not willing to take on? So I think that's another key point. And the mental side of this, as you alluded to, is a really big part, right? It's hard. It's hard, especially for people like yourself who run a lot and do this, and this is what you do. And then to have that taken away from you for a little while is very hard, especially with that unknown of where you're going to go.
Yeah.
I think you're going to be fine. You're going to go back to it. But I do think that is hard. And that's part of the hard part about surgery. And when you talk about this, people don't know what to do who are listening to this and who are runners and hurt. Because where are you going to get back to and when is it going to be? And that all of those unknowns, I think, as human beings make us a little bit anxious.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. And Stephanie did say in the previous part of the interview that, it took her a year before she was pain-free and then 2 years before she really felt like herself. Like, it's not like it was suddenly, get running, feel great, off you go. But it took her body.
For sure. And I don't want to overstate that. At 6 weeks, you're not going to be doing your marathon. But it was simply to illustrate that we are doing better at surgery. And yes, this is 3 months you feel pretty good kind of surgery for a lot of this Achilles stuff. 6 months you're running, you're feeling pretty good. It is a year recovery for sure. And then, at the level that you and Stephanie are, it takes a little while to get all of that back. And that could be 2 years.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. Is there, for someone, I have encouraged people, talked about Stedman endlessly, about you specifically. For someone who isn't able to come to Colorado, what would you say for finding someone?
Yeah, so we have a great society of orthopedic foot and ankle specialists, which is the AOFAS, so the American Orthopedic Foot and Ankle Society. So it's AOFAS.org is the website, and then you can find physicians under there. To your point, everybody's a little different, right, at how aggressive they're going to be, and we're all getting a little bit more aggressive with some of these rehab things. But those are wonderful surgeons who have been through specialized training, as I had, not just being an orthopedic surgeon, but having subspecialty training in foot and ankle surgery. And I think that's a great resource for finding someone close to you. And that's probably what I would recommend.
Okay, thank you. Is there any last things you would like to remind someone who is, in this step right now?
Yeah, I think, maximizing the easy things that we talked about with both of these Achilles tendon scenarios. So the non-insertional, which is a little higher, and then the insertional, which is right where the Achilles tendon inserts on the calcaneus. Using some type of a heel lift. I like a silicone heel cup. Using a night splint, getting going with some physical therapy, some formal stretching of your calf, and also then doing it on your own. And it is something that you can't just do twice a week with a physical therapist. It needs to be a 3 times a day kind of activity. And then with the oversight of the physical therapist, that can really help as well. And then, I do feel a little bad when you say, as people reach out to me, say, oh gosh, I'm in such terrible shape. I can't run around with my kids. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but if you're at that point, go to AOFAS.org and find somebody, right? And talk to somebody, because there are ways to get better than not being able to hang out with your kids or, throw a baseball or something.
For sure. No, absolutely. And that's kind of the point of this episode is it is debilitating for a lot of people. So thank you so much for the questions. Thank you for being you. I have just talked to so many people about how seeing you in person the day before, I was a mess, even more of a mess than I was in the hour before surgery. I was a complete mess that day. And just as soon as I saw you, I just felt this calm and this trust, and there was no, for me, fear of is he going to mess this up? I just had 100% faith in you. And I just want to thank you for, just being who you are, because it really, really made me feel confident that I'd made the right choice. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I don't know what to say, how to respond to those kind words, but thank you very much. Yeah, I promise I will always do the best I can for you. That's really all you can ask for.
You really have for so many. So thank you so much for joining me.
This was a lot of fun, Tina. Hopefully we catch up soon.
I know I said it there to him, but I can't begin to tell you how helpful it was to have a surgeon that I put my complete trust into. His confidence and belief in me and my body healing, and also his skills, just made me feel at peace with what I was doing. I'm so grateful to him and his team for the care they were able to give me during my time and in the checkup since. Finally, we are on to Anna Robinson, who is a PT at Howard Head Sports Medicine. We're going to talk about the return to running and what life looks like after you begin the recovery process. So let's head on over to Anna. Anna, I am so excited to introduce all my listeners to you and I can't even thank you enough for the source of calm you have brought me over the last few weeks. So thank you so much for being here. You are a joy, and I'm excited for everyone to get to know you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah. So in this episode, we have covered kind of the discovery of a Haglund's deformity, the frustrations of trying to figure ways around it. For those reaching the point, ultimately, like myself, I need to do something about this. I want to get this taken care of at the source, having the surgery. And then where you primarily come in is post-surgery. So to start with, is there anything that you want to say that is particularly interesting about this injury, maybe compared to other, I mean, if you want to use runner injuries, that's great. But just in general, is there anything that you've noticed with this particular injury that stands out?
Yeah, I would say that it's quite common, as I'm sure has been covered in your prior interviews. It's also not something that surprises me to see in athletes, and especially endurance athletes. And the finding of the Haglund's isn't necessarily of great concern. It's when it becomes a problem and the conservative measures have been exhausted. So I would just say that to those of whom may observe that they may have one, or see others who do, it's never something that's shock and awe to me or alarming. It's more of, again, the symptoms and addressing the symptoms, and whether or not that's successful with all the conservative measures that lead up to where you are today, which is, training management, load management, and working with specialists who look to tackle the conservative side of the problem.
So what other sports do you tend to see Haglund's deformities from, other than running?
Yeah, the easy answer would be endurance athletes. So I work a lot with cross country skiers, and I would say here mountain sport athletes, mountain bikers, of course, over distance runners, cyclists of all kinds, and many, many people who put in large volumes of training can develop the presence of a Haglund's deformity. And so it's just, again, managing those symptoms if they arise from footwear and, like I said, loading management and conservative measures and beyond. So it is quite common, but I would say it would be easy to say that in the athlete, it's those of whom are putting in big volume.
Sure. Although I was surprised when Dr. Haytmanek said in the previous section that it develops over 2 to 3 years. I would have thought it would have been way longer than that, but that was very interesting to me that that's the kind of period of time that you're finding that is where it really maybe he meant like that's where it kicks up into the next level, and it really is bothering people. But yeah, I think because when I look back on myself, I'm like, I did 10, 14 years of high level running, and I never had this problem. And now doing half the mileage is when it came back. It really has emphasized to me how like fragile our little body ecosystems are if we aren't, addressing them and giving them the respect that they deserve, at least in my case. Definitely wasn't taking some things seriously and being a bit like wishy-washy with what I was wearing on my feet and just some of the steps I was taking. So that was interesting to me. So when when I had an appointment with you at Howard Head scheduled for the day after my surgery, and then 2 days after, I was kind of amazed at that situation. So can you talk about how, obviously this is not something that everyone is going to do, but in general, you kind of get people moving, gentle exercises. We're not, as I was joking with you before we recorded, I'm not doing an 8-mile run 4 weeks post-surgery, but, doing some gentle movement kind of, in my mind, goes counter to what I thought recovering from surgery was going to be.
Yes, when it's appropriate, we do what we can to initiate rehab as soon as possible. And there are many great reasons for that. One is, in your case, we were able to take down the splint and observe the incision and keep an eye on that, which is that early concern, to make sure all of the basic healing is occurring and to plan and everything's coming along as we expect. So that's one advantage. The other is to have an opportunity to work on any swelling that you're experiencing as early as possible. And I think also just being able to move just a bit more normally than you would in a postoperative splint is also very helpful. So that early range of motion has been shown in many types of injuries and many types of surgeries in the body to be advantageous when we are respecting tissue healing times, and of course in great communication with the surgeon who put in so much time and work to do an amazing job. So first and foremost, we're in a protection phase, but we find that early physical therapy and management and observation of the wound can be really helpful in those early days.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually found myself early on in the process thinking, what would I do if something happened to my kids? And we had a tornado alarm go off, warning. And I was like, what would I do? Would I just grab my kids and run? Would I figure out the risk of making it go, you go, leave me here. It was so interesting that I was in this situation, protection is everything. But what would I do if I was in a life-threatening situation? Would I feel? So anyway, that's aside. But that definitely went through my mind when the tornado alarm went off at 4 a.m.
Oh gosh, so I'm happy it was not burning anything scary.
No, it did not. So then, as we look to the recovery journey, obviously this vastly depends on the person. You said that protection is the focus in the first 6 weeks. What does a typical road to recovery with an injury like this look like?
So when it comes to the protection phase, we want to specify the restrictions based on the surgery, right? So your surgery is very unique, and there certainly is a wide spectrum of ways in which we approach a postoperative Achilles, right? And so, as your listeners know, this is not the postoperative recovery of a rupture and a surgical repair, but instead of the Haglund's debridement. So what we want to do in the first 6 weeks, if I like to break it up in those chunks, although we really try to take a look at the athlete very individually beyond that tissue healing time, and we can go into this further, but to look at the way or how you're healing and how we're managing the rehab and addressing the criteria-based progression, which is ideally the way that we will head. But early on, we want to look at tissue healing times and protection phase, but also maximizing very safe and adequate load to the tendon to instate that healing process earlier, to influence that tissue to continue to heal and ultimately remodel. The other thing too is that in your case, this was, a removal of bone, not a repair, so to speak, from an attachment of the tendon to the bone. So we have to be very careful to protect the tendon, but it is, like we were saying, different than had you had a tear. So I may be going too far into detail there, but what I mean in the first 6 weeks is we just take care to protect your tendon, and the research has shown that there is benefit and it's advantageous to walk earlier when we are in a controlled scenario, which is why we continue to keep in touch, and we have very clear guidelines as to how that looks in the non-weight bearing phase for you, which was 2 weeks. and then initially weight bearing for 2, and then weaning out of the boot over the next 2, which is weeks 5 and 6 after surgery. And there was a paper published recently. This is a very wide spectrum depending upon your surgeon. So this is not a hard and fast rule, but for you, this was what was the best approach based on your procedure. Range of motion restrictions is something that we also consider, and we focus a lot on plantar flexion, inversion, eversion, and we work on the functional progression of dorsiflexion when it's appropriate. So that's some of the range of motion restrictions that I consider at this time as well.
And what do you find that as people progress through this protection phase and then building into the PT, the true work of where you're starting to get pushed a little bit. Okay, you need to work through the pain now. You need to start to build on this and get your body back to full strength. What do you find that people tend to struggle with the most?
Great question. I think that what I would say is one of the things that people struggle with is maybe not an actual specific movement, but just grasping the whole story and how we get from A to B. So I think that one of the most important things that I hope comes across to the athlete and to the patient is, let's take a look at this big picture and how does it look from today to when we start a running progression, and who do we need to assemble to make you feel supported in the whole process? Because there will be some point in time in this recovery where you feel you're at a plateau longer than you wish, or you have a little bit more swelling when you weren't expected after an exercise or an activity, or we move into what feels to you much more typical training, and you have a hitch in your get up at that time. And what does that look like, and how do we solve problems at that time? So I would say that an effort to solve those problems as they come up, the things that may be difficult, establishing that plan and that team is really, really helpful. And I love staying very close, working with the surgeon and his team. I really appreciate being in contact with you and your local team in this case as well. And the other thing that's really, really helpful about the local team is that you have people who know you very well, like a coach or a strength and conditioning coach, who are very, very skilled at seeing how bodies move and know how you move, and are able to identify, maybe in some cases earlier than you may feel, that you may be fatigued, or you may be not moving as well as you normally do, or your technique is starting to fail is too strong of a word, but maybe you're not running as you typically do with your typical technique. And so that's a wonderful asset in the later stages. But so what I would say is early on, though, is that the number one goal is to restore good quality proprioception and balance, and to restore that plantar flexion strength and range of motion, so that you feel localized, that you have the balance and strength that you had before you were starting to hurt, and that we develop through the entire limb and through your entire body that strength that is necessary to meet the demands of running and to meet the demands of the training that you want to resume. So some people may find that achieving a heel raise is really difficult, but some may find that it's those more complex movements that are integrating the entire lower extremity in a portion of the running cycle that's harder. So I would say in this particular injury, there isn't one difficult activity like I think it is in others, but it's whether or not that's those earlier or later phases where you're sequencing higher level movements that become a little tricky.
And that's what I suspected, that it wasn't going to be like one moment or one time. It's kind of as you said, the kind of accumulation of the journey. And that relates to what I want to ask next, which is like, for someone who is hearing about this, really digging into this, there's very little out there for runners about this. And so this is their major source of information. And they're looking at the recovery process and they're thinking, okay, like at least Stephanie had talked earlier about it being 1 year before she was able to get close to pain-free, and 2 years before she felt like herself. Still gets little angry moments every now and again, but nowhere near what it was before. For someone who is looking at that return and thinking, like 1 year before I can run without pain, I mean, that feels terrifying. What would you say to that person?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say that if the person is reaching the point that she was and that you were, then take a moment to be with that and decide if that's where you can stay, to be happy and to be satisfied with your functional level. And, some people may willingly look to move to other activities and be perfectly fine from a pain standpoint. But, once you've made the decision to make a change in this regard and consider surgery, I think that just know that you're giving yourself the time to continue to have improvement at that year and a half and 2 year mark. You've already made the decision, it's a long road ahead, but have faith in the fact that you will continue to feel better well beyond that year mark. So I guess that's sort of a half cup full way of looking at it.
Yes.
The other way I describe it is that each, maybe the first 6 to 8 weeks feels a little tough. I mean, those of us who enjoy exercise, enjoy running, love running in every way. I mean, it fulfills us in so many ways. And so to lose that for a period of time is its own difficult journey. But what I can say is that each month and even each week, when you're starting to get into more traditional training, strength training, you're building in your volume progression, whether that be walking, whether that be looping in more time on the bike and other cross training methods like swimming. And then by the time we get to more hiking and running type activities, if you're willing, you can look back and each week, and if not each month, you are going to see meaningful change in your experience, and so it is a lot to take on. It is a big period of time to commit to this, but I promise that after that acute phase, you will notice that something gets better for you and feels more fulfilling, and you start to feel more like you every month along the way.
And I know I've said this to you, and I've said it a lot publicly, that I have been really surprised with how well I've handled this period, because it really did, even from the beginning to me, maybe, okay, the first week was rough. Like, I'm not gonna beat around the bush on that. Like the first week, the pain, and plus the just like kind of being so, especially for me, slipping on that water the second day, like really put me in a like, I don't want to do anything that could risk this situation. But after that, I really already have been enjoying the progression side of, adding weight on my crutches and like day by day, and then adding weight on my boot, and then taking my boot. Or like my friends and I had a little celebration when I did my first like hour of not wearing, where I got to wear my tennis shoe around, like, little things like that, like celebrating that. Like today I get to move up to 2 hours of not wearing my shoe or not wearing my boot. Like I really have enjoyed that piece of it. And same with getting back in the gym with my strength coach. Like, even though I'm not doing anywhere near what I want to be doing and not doing a lot of the stuff I enjoy doing, it's fun to do new things and keep progressing in that way. So I think, I'm glad you brought up that point, because I think that is an important point to make, that there are continuous little steps along the way.
Yeah, I applaud you for that. I do, because it is difficult. And that's one of the main things I'll share with people is when you've achieved your day-to-day activity, the volume required to do work activities, take care of the family, go to the grocery store, whatever it may be, remember to celebrate that, because that too, a lot of people looks upwards of 10,000 steps. And that's very meaningful when it comes to volume. So celebrate all of those moments, even if it's hard to as your athletic self, as an athlete.
Absolutely. Yeah. I put on the other day, I walked a mile with a half an hour break in the middle. And it took me 30, not including the stop, I paused my watch, it took me 38 minutes to walk that mile. And I debated whether to put it on Strava. I don't know if you know what Strava is, but like there's the fitness app. And I was like, should I put that on there? Like, that seems really dumb to put a 1 mile. And it wasn't a mile, because I'd stopped my watch at one point and then I didn't restart it. But I knew it was a mile. And I thought, you know what? Like, this is such a good example of like, that got me to but that day ended up being 5,000 steps, which is nothing compared to what I was doing. But like, that's a huge accomplishment. Well, not accomplishment, but that was a huge day in my physical activity up to this point. And so, yeah, I'm glad you said that. Is there anything else you want to remind people listening about Haglund's as we round this episode out?
I don't think specifically. I think the only thing that came to mind when you were saying that is that the in whatever way is good for the individual to measure that progress can be really helpful. So I'm glad that you did that on Strava, or you would utilize your watch or a step counter, because that's really, really helpful to define milestones. And I think that for the athlete, when, again, like I sort of mentioned earlier, is that we don't necessarily give ourselves credit for the minutia of the day. But if you had that first time where you went on that walk, that's like I said, a very meaningful jump in volume. And if from a physiologic standpoint, if you didn't have increase in pain and did not have increase in swelling, and you recovered from that event, that is a new demonstration of where your current threshold is, or your current, safe level of activity. And so that's a really useful tool that I use all the time in rehab.
That's great. I love that. And someone actually commented on there, like, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And I was like, oh, that is the perfect thing to say right now. Like, it literally is. So, Anna, thank you so much personally for all you've done for me, for sharing with us today, and just the way your team continues to push forward and figure out what is best for athletes, even if that is kind of suggesting different methods to what have been used in the past. So I'm so grateful for you, and allowing people like myself to get moving and get going on the thing that we love the most. So thank you.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
Before we go any further, I just want to give a quick shout out to the Running for Real team. Without them, I would not be able to do barely anything compared to what I'm able to do today. They are behind the scenes. They are there for me. I am just so appreciative of them. To Jeremy Nessel, our podcast editor, audio consultant, and someone who's been with me since the start. To Sally Pontarelli, our content and operations manager, who is there day to day doing all the things to help me be successful. To Kelsey Wang, our head of design, and Louise Murphy, our associate designer. And finally, to Sandy Gutierrez, our photographer and content strategist. I am appreciative of all of you and wouldn't be able to do what I do without you. Whew, that is a lot of information in one episode. I am so grateful to those 4 human beings. I don't know what I would have done without any of them. They have been such a source of light in my life, and I'm just so grateful. I hope this episode has been helpful for you. If you are someone going through this, you are not alone. I know it feels like there's nothing out there. I hope this filled that gap for you of what there is to know, what you can do, things you can try. And ultimately, if you have to make the same choice I did, how to go about it and find someone who you can trust. I want to encourage you to check out the links in the show notes today by going to runningforreal.com/episode 401. You can also find links to our sponsors, our partners in this episode who make this possible by going to runningforreal.com/episode 401. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you listening. I hope if you are dealing with this, you find peace within yourself, whatever your choice, whatever your path ends up being. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.